Hobbies. Majority of the world has one, and men specifically use them as staple points of decompression, interest, passion, progression, and in some cases, self-discovery. Hobbies can be defined as activities pursued with constant interest that typically are not tied to professional and academic ambitions. One particular hobby has taken the world by storm: video games. Before the year 2000, the stigma and perspective of video games wasn't all that great. There's a lot of negative aspects tied to people's control, impulse, the violence, with plenty of derogatory terms to describe people that enjoyed playing video games. Fast forwarding to the time of today, while cross-referencing different consensus reports, about 7 out of 10 people in the US play video games and consistently do so, averaging about 12 hours a week. About 213 million Americans play video games every week, while almost 3.4 billion gamers exist across the world. The average age for a gamer is 32, with the male to female demographic, surprisingly, being split at about 60 to 40. In all cases, 8 out of 10 gamers suggest that video games bring joy, provide mental stimulation and stress relief, the ability to find and create a community, and feel like it helps with their cognitive skills, thought processes, reactive times. Almost 9 out of 10 gamers end up expanding their social circles, finding new friends and relationships, while over half of the overall demographic using video games to stay connected to important relationships. Additionally, the same statistics suggest that on average, half of people who play video games have either found their best friend, significant other, and even their spouse through video games. The dichotomy of the cultures that exist in the world of video games is casual versus competitive. On one end, you have people that play for convenience, fun, simplicity, with no certain direction besides the entertainment, joy, togetherness with a community, exploration, adventure. On the other side, you have direct, passionate, driven, competitive, winning tournaments, or are involved in esports and play for a living. Both groups entertain the idea of having fun, they just approach it differently. Clearly, in the year of 2024, the perspective of video games and being involved with them or choosing them as a hobby has evolved. And I think we should take a look as to why that is. With how popular video games and technology was advancing, it wasn't long before the medical field decided to experiment. The theme that several studies have suggested is that, contrary to common belief, skills developed within a video game framework are not confined to the virtual environment in which they are learned. In June 2020, the FDA approved video game and digital treatments within consideration of COVID-19. Since then, gaming interventions and therapy have skyrocketed. Video games are used within realms of neuropsychological rehabilitation, forms of learning, recovery of impaired functions, as well as exposure to the uses of VR, and developed video games for the purpose of therapeutic use. One game in particular was used to treat ADHD in children called Endeavor. Some of the outcomes revolving around video games led to them being the gold standard in things like exposure therapy to assess phobias and PTSD, which are some of the most common disorders within the realm of psychology. The way this incorporation of digital treatment existed was through practices of desensitization, showing that through VR and safe environments, you can create lifelike scenarios to reduce the triggers of traumatic stimulus that is experienced by patients. Another therapy with video games as a major intervention is emotion-focused therapy, where the therapist acts as an emotional coach and guide as you play adventurous or role-playing games, making decisions, advancing your character, and identifying a sense of self with guidance of a therapist at your side. All therapies mentioned have seen a wide range of success, and that success is improving as technological advancements go further. But what are the variables that video games induce, and what is it about them that promotes a sense of insight? And also, how can we apply that to us? In order to understand how video games transcend the bounds of other hobbies in reference to what can be transferable, we must first understand the state of flow. The term flow refers to a particular psychophysical state in which people are completely immersed in what they are doing, to the point of losing their sense of time and having exceptional perception levels. Elements that characterize the state of flow can be things like clear goals, total concentration on the task, loss of self-awareness, distortion of the sense of time, direct and unambiguous feedback, balance between challenge and skill, sense of control, intrinsic pleasure, and an integration between action and awareness. The flow model is designed as a middle ground, a funnel zone, in which opportunities for action and the individual's potential are balanced. Basically, what puts us in flow besides genuine interest is the balance of opportunities for action and our own skill. Games like RPGs where we start to identify with the avatar, projecting a personal sense of identity on screen. What can take us out of flow are issues of imbalance, like when an objective causes a sense of inadequacy because the requirement of skill is above where we are, causing frustration. Or the task at hand is being too easy, too simple, which would induce a sense of boredom and apathy. The greatest state of flow can be achieved in narrative games and challenging games. While in this state, gamers can safely disassociate while still managing the dimension of self-control, while the game provides clear, defined goals and precise feedback. This unique state represents an immersive and transformative experience. It leads the player to be less defensive and more open to self-regulation. However, there are situations in which a state of flow cannot be reached. It happens when the video game asks too much of the player and frustration ensues, or by contrast, the game bores the player by asking too little, creating a negative compensation, like an existential void. Reaching this state of flow really depends on the challenges provided by the game. On the other hand, it also depends on the player's characteristics. In addition to constantly improving their skills, players must also be capable of maintaining self-control despite being immersed in deep emotions. While one particular personality trait appears to be related to an increased possibility of experiencing flow, which is people with a high sense of conscientiousness, the significant element of entering the state of flow is that of immersion. Immersion can be defined as the sensation of being surrounded by a completely other reality that takes over all of our attention, our whole perceptual apparatus. And immersion can be divided into three subcomponents: sensory immersion, immersion based on challenge, and imaginative immersion. When total immersion into the activity is achieved, a person can enter a sense of presence, the feeling of being physically within the simulated reality, seeing through the eyes of their avatar, and experiencing real emotions. It is in this feeling of immersion that we encounter some significant psychological phenomena. The first being paradox of failure. Failure in the social and economic world is highly discouraged. We often fear failure on behalf of the guilt, shame, and disappointment that we would feel should we try, and the possibility of failure is high, or the likeliness that we do not want to diminish our image, especially in front of others. However, when we're immersed in playing video games, we often go against this belief, and it's unique to video games because we're less likely to duplicate this behavior in the real world. The paradox of failure is to state that although you will try and fail, you will try again and fail, but fail better, making incremental successes towards a lesser failure that eventually leads to succeeding. In this case, failure can be defined as the inability to make progress towards the goal. The paradox of failure is in the idea that we make progress towards that goal with each subsequent failure. This takes on a form of productive failure. Failure and frustration become a way for the player to contemplate and reformulate what it means to him or her to be in a difficult situation. These moments have an interesting tension, leading people to think about why they don't stop playing and why they don't quit. It is therefore important to emphasize that losing in a game does not always mean defeat. Failure can be correctable, representing the individual's growth and the perfect tool to confront difficulties constructively by learning from the past. This is consistent with one of the rules of flow, which is the perfect balance between the player's abilities and the game's requests. Proposing tasks that are easy enough to master, but challenging enough to stimulate the player's attention and desire for success, games support the player's motivation through a push to success, challenging them optimally. Playing is thus a process of a continuous gamer's growth until a sense of security control over what is happening in the surrounding environment is reached. In-game frustrations is therefore temporary and mediated by the certainty that one day the player's skills will be enough to face increasingly hostile enemies and increasingly tricky situations. The significance of understanding paradox of failure is that it in turn allows us to understand the following phenomenon, which is embracing a sense of discovery. Through the paradox of failure, it allows us to engage in our idea of self through our avatar with the failures that we do see or that we do meet. It allows us to explore the knowledge of feelings of inferiority, what makes us inadequate, and how to identify what changes are required to reduce our inadequacy by improving other aspects of ourself within that game. Additionally, it allows us to identify and understand the forms of catharsis that we seek out. Catharsis can be defined as an emotional release, eliciting feelings of restoration, renewal, and revitalization. In historical concepts, it can be seen as an emotional cleansing, a way of doing something in fictional practice that doesn't lead to realistic action. These elements of self-discovery can prove vital when learning how this applies to reality. The human mind is an incredible thing, and it is within these phenomena that we seek how transferable these elements that gamers already show, whether they're aware of their subconscious power or not, into their real lives. Choosing to persevere against countless forms of defeat can lead us to far more purposeful goals and manifesting measurable milestones, or at least starting them. Understanding our own inferiority complex can accrue the wisdom to learn what we're bad at, and in turn present a list of inadequacies that require our attention and personal form of discipline. Seeing what monstrous form our version of catharsis can take on gives us a bit of insight towards our own shadow, which can promote a sense of humility and modesty, because for some, it may be the first time they ever look in the mirror instead of externalizing their suffering. It all leads to an overarching question: how can this be transferable? Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is where you come in. How we do this next part is subjective and it's case-by-case basis, much like how to implement our own forms of discipline. But I do have some tips. Take it seriously. As one of the elements required to reaching states of flow, it is paramount to understand that it requires a genuine sense of authenticity. Seek introspection, discomfort, and judgmental challenge. Continue to address forms of inadequacy and don't defeat your ability to be courageous. Empower it instead. Most of all, be humble. These are characteristics that you already have, and you have to have faith in yourself to draw it from the comfortable virtual realm that you are used to into the ugly reality that you may be in. I believe in your ability to do so, so use that until you do. I understand that this may seem unorthodox, off meta for the gamers that are out there, but the one thing I've learned is it's all about using what you know to conquer what you don't. I believe this to be a great start. I understand that a lot of people face obstacles that they're not confident with, and so they just shy away, fearful of failure, consumed by hesitation. So my challenge to the gamers out there is use something you are comfortable with, use something you are confident with, and give it a shot. You have nothing to lose if you feel like your life can be improved. Obviously, there is some issues in gaming. I can take off the rose-tinted glasses and state that addiction and loss of impulse control can be a massive issue. Some extensive forms of gaming can lead to decreased value in living and a reduced ability to be social. I'm not batting away these issues, and I'm not batting away these significant troubles. These are serious problems. And should someone be suffering from an addiction of gaming, obviously this message isn't tailored towards that person. That person needs a different kind of help. But for the people that have gaming as a component and a structural hobby in their life, and then they are not consumed by it, then I recommend you try some of my suggestions. It's one thing to know what gaming is. It's another to understand how it can be used. And with all the negative stigma that exists around people that simply play video games, what a shock would it be to flip the script and show how productive it can be. I think everyone deserves a chance at something more, and I think we owe it to ourselves to find out who that version of us can be. Thank you to everyone that watched the video. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you enjoyed the content so far, consider subscribing. If you disliked the video, then dislike it. Hopefully you'll never see me again, but leave a comment in the comment section down below for any of your thoughts and perspectives regarding my take on video games and its ability to assist or inhibit the lives of others. I've found some unique variables regarding gaming. I think that this is worth mentioning. I think some of this stuff people may already know, but the thing is that how to make it transferable is quite the trick. And I think that's something that's worth exploring. I think that in the realm of psychology and therapy, people are already trying this route. But what about your average person that may not know this? I say, why not? If this is already a staple point of your life, why not? I think that if we can manage to keep our hobbies constructive, there's a lot of benefit that we can draw from them. So if this is so common of a hobby, then let's see what we can do with it. That's all I got for today. Thanks again, and I'll go ahead. See you next time.